Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Failures to Fortunes podcast, the show where we fearlessly dive into the untold stories of real estate investors' greatest setbacks and how they turned those failures into resounding successes. I'm your host, Kate Berry, and we're talking with real estate investors across the country to learn exactly how and why they failed, and how they took that failure and turned it into a powerful lesson for their business. So come along with me, Kate Berry, on this transformative journey from failure to fortune. I invite you to join our supportive community where together we can inspire, educate, and motivate each other to achieve all of our real estate investing goals. Welcome to the Real Estate Investing Failures to Fortunes podcast. I'm your host, Kate Berry. On this show, we dive deep into the journeys of real estate investors and agents who have experienced failures but are willing to share the lessons learned that help them turn those failures into fortunes. We are thrilled to be here today with our guest, Damion Lupo. Damien is a seasoned entrepreneur who has launched and grown over 70 companies from $0 to $100 million throughout a remarkable 25-year journey. In addition to being a prolific author with 12 published books, Damien is celebrated for his extraordinary achievements in building multiple companies from the ground up, many of which have reached 7, 8, and even 9-figure valuations. Despite a significant setback that saw him lose a $20 million portfolio at the age of 30, Damien's resilience and determination led him to not only overcome homelessness, but also rebuild his wealth beyond 9 figures. Today, he is a driving force in transforming the retirement landscape with his groundbreaking retirement plan system and revolutionizing the home and apartment construction industry through his pioneering work with FrameTek. So, Damien, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's really great to be here. Thanks, Kate.
Yeah, of course. So you've got quite a resume, right? 25 years experience, 12 books, multiple companies. But let's start at the beginning. How did you get started in real estate?
So it's kind of funny. The one thing that makes me laugh when you say resume, I'm like, I have a resume that's unhireable. So like when you're an entrepreneur, it's the last time I had a job, if you will, was a volunteer job in 2010, about 14 years ago, worked 6 months volunteering for a political campaign and got fired because I was trying to win. And I didn't realize it until I did that campaign that most campaigns, the campaign workers that are like professional campaign staff, they don't really care if they win or lose. They just want to do a good job to get to the next bigger campaign.
Right.
So that's like a typical government mindset. And as an entrepreneur, I was always looking for something bigger, bolder, like what can I do to tap into things, my potential. So back in 99, I was selling insurance and I read some of Donald Trump's books and I thought, oh, this is great. This real estate stuff sounds way better than insurance. Back then it was art of the deal and I got excited and I went to a seminar and learned some things about real estate after a buddy of mine told me about a deal and wanted me to be a part of it. And the first deal I did at the same time, this was all happening the December of 99, January 20. I was the guy that had the money for this deal. And I laughed when he asked me to be a part of it and said, I need you because of your money. I said, I don't have any money. I'm a broke insurance agent. He said, well, it's only $6,000. And so I took a cash advance out of my credit card. So I was the money guy using Visa. And that's how we bought the first house, which is a terrible idea.
That's right.
I look at some of the stuff and I think, why would you do that? And it's because that's what you do as an entrepreneur. There was, at that point, I didn't know what I didn't know. So I wasn't worried about something blowing up. Bankruptcy was like a crazy idea.
Right.
And so no big deal. Just take out a $6,000 cash advance. What's the worst thing that could happen? And what happened is I learned a lot about rehabbing a house because I had to learn how to electrocute myself and get high off paint fumes because I didn't open windows. And it was like that whole experience, it was the start. I went into something I had no knowledge about. And I literally, that first house, I went to that seminar in Orlando. And it was this incredible experience where I got to buy tons of tapes, literally tapes. This is like back in the age of tapes.
Yeah.
And bought an extra suitcase to bring all these tapes home and then did what these people trained me to do. And I was dumb enough to do what they said without challenging it and saying, well, I think I have a better way. I just said, okay, you must know what you're talking about. And that's how it started. It was really leveraging other people's experience, the OPE, instead of this, well, I'll just make it up or I'll spend 20 years figuring it out. That seemed dumb. So this was the initial hack. And it's how anybody that wants to get going, that is the ultimate hack. You attach yourself to some other person's experience and then you do what they say. And so that's all I did.
Yeah, it sounds like almost the opposite of analysis paralysis, right? You're like, I'm just good. That sounds good. Let's go for it. But I love that. I think that so many entrepreneurs are attracted to the real estate industry because it can be fast like that. If you find a deal, you find somebody, come up with some money, and you can get going on a deal, how it's exciting, it's fun. And how did that first deal work out for you?
So one of the things I learned there in 2000, this is the same, there's no exception to this rule. You have a certain temperature. Like there's a thermostat, it's a well thermostat in your body. And mine was set at a certain level, and buying the real estate was pushing the temperature above what I was at. And so my being was pulling it back down. So what that looked
Mhm.
like was I bought this house and I did what they said for marketing. And then all these people were calling me to sell me their houses, give me their houses, buy the house and lease option the house that I had purchased, and I wasn't returning phone calls. It's because I
Mhm.
was self-sabotaging because I believed in my core that I was only worth X. And so it was interesting. It took about 4 months of a lot of calls coming in and no calls going out. And I played a game called Cash Flow. And I was like, huh, this is interesting. I want to learn about my own self. So I did a financial statement on myself and realized I was about 30 days from having to file bankruptcy. And I went, oh crap. And it was like it blew up my thermostat. And I was like, oh, so the fear or the panic can change your thermostat. And that was my experience. And so over the next 30 days, I literally bought 8 houses and I got all of them lease optioned. And so all of a sudden I was like, oh, I'm in business. Like my thermostat went, I was probably about halfway to becoming a millionaire in a month. I mean, it was so
Wow.
fast because once you take your regulator off, take your foot off the brakes, and that's what it was. My foot was on the brakes of my own wealth
Mm.
creation. Where most people are at, it's analysis paralysis, it's fear of being judged. There's all these things. They're trying to blend in with the people around them because that's what we do. We want to be safe.
Right.
We want people to
Mhm.
like us.
That's our
And
instinct, right?
you know, right. So like
Survival.
there's all these things limit us. And then after that, it was this rocket for several years. I ended up buying 150 houses. About the first 30 of those were just me taking over mortgages and doing things without conventional financing, which I think is important because a lot of people go, well, I can't really qualify, or I can qualify for one house and I'm stuck. The reality is you're stuck because you're sticking yourself in your position. And if you break your thermostat or blow it up or get around people that will help yank you out of your foxhole, then
Yes.
it's entirely possible to create wealth. And within a year, I was a millionaire. And a couple of years, I
Right.
was a multimillionaire. And that was just a function of doing the thing that other people said, this is how you do it. And I believed them.
Yeah. And were you doing a lot of those deals by yourself, or were you still using that other people's experience? Were you partnering, syndicating?
But this is in the day where syndicating was taking documents from a conference and photocopying them and saying, okay, this is my JV agreement. It was
Right.
very, very dumb. And like none of that stuff, I'm sure, was in compliance with the SEC. The stuff
I'm
that I've
sure.
done in the last 8 years, it's all regulated. It's SEC, they're attorneys. I don't play an attorney on TV or in real life, like all that stuff that
Yeah.
we do. And people go, well, I don't want to spend $20,000 to have an attorney drop docs or to do these things. Back then, I
Mhm.
was just hustling, grinding, and it was more of I'll ask for forgiveness later. I was busy creating things. And so
Right.
it was less concerning back then. Am I doing something that's not part of the rules? I was leveraging what people said. Here's how you do it. Here's how you buy something. Here's how you sell it. Here's how you market. And so I was just doing that. And you do get into trouble because when you're moving fast, I mean, you can do everything perfectly right and you'll die very, very quickly, meaning you won't get much done on your journey.
Mhm.
So there has to be a willingness to trip and make mistakes and not do it perfect. It doesn't mean you're reckless. And I think that a case could be made for reckless activity. Damien in his early 20s doing things that were a little bit nuts. But there was the ultimate reason that things worked so quickly was because I leveraged other people and I mostly blindly followed them. I hired mentors. I spent about $1 million over 5 years on mentoring and masterminds. And one guy I spent $400,000 on over about 2 years. And so when I hear people say, well, that costs a lot of money. That mastermind's $30,000 a year, or that mentor costs. Like, if you want to talk to Patrick Bet David, you can talk to him. Anybody can pick up the phone and literally get on and talk to him. And he charges $22,000 for 15 minutes. So people are accessible, but then you say, well, that's too much money. Well, how is it too much money? Because these people are they're giving you years. So I guarantee you a conversation with somebody like that has been very successful would that 22,000 could buy you a year or two or five or 10 in 15 minutes. That's
Right.
how powerful OPE is if it's the right OPE. But people aren't ready for it. Their thermostat is still stuck and they say,
Mhm.
well, no, it's too much money. And it's like, well, you think that money is more important than time. And people that are incredibly wealthy always look at time being the most valuable thing. And if they can buy it, they buy it. And it doesn't really matter how much it costs. I'm going to find a time machine and I'll pay whatever it costs for that time
Right.
machine.
That's so true. So speaking of time machine, let's fast forward a little bit to the $20 million portfolio loss. How did that happen? What was the market conditions? Tell us that story.
So if you've seen any of Elon Musk's rocket ships that go up, a lot of them go up and blow up on their way
Mhm.
up. And that's part of a journey when you're creating wealth and you're doing it at a pretty high level. There's a likelihood that some of those rockets are going to blow up, maybe the one that you're on. And so in 2007 and 8, I had a number of projects. I had sold pretty much all the houses and
Mhm.
decided, oh, I'm so smart. Like, let's go do some more. And instead of taking a break because the market was irrational and psychotic,
Mhm.
and didn't make any sense with what was going on, pumping money into the system, kind of like the last few years.
Mhm.
I decided to go back in and had projects all over the country. And every project failed within a 12-month period. Every one of them, instead of making me a million or two or three, I lost over a million on each one. And the portfolio went from 20 million to -5 in a 12-month period. And I ended up homeless.
My
And that was
gosh.
not part of my vision. Like my vision board did not show no money, no dog, no house, no girlfriend. It's all gone. It was, I probably should have moved to Nashville and started writing country songs because my
Right.
life was a damn country song. So it
That's where
was
all
kind
those
of funny.
investors went, right?
It happens. Like I think Nashville's full of songwriters and former real estate investors that thought they had a good idea. And so that's
Singing the blues.
yeah, that's what it was. And it was a bit of a reset. And a lot of people had trauma in 2008 and there was a lot of startovers and mine wasn't really any different. It was a different number. Some people go, 20 million is a lot of money to have vaporized. It doesn't matter if it's 20 million, 20,000, 200,000. If it's everything you've got plus some, it's traumatic. I mean,
Yeah.
you're being shot and it's a stun and then you have to recover from it. And it's, I mean,
Right.
you end up in like a psychological ER. Like you have to go through this process that takes a while. There's and that's often people will ask, well, what happened after that? Like, how did you get through that? And
Right.
for the first process, the first step is ignore it, pretend it didn't happen, and act as if everything is normal. And that lasts for a little while, and then reality hits you, and you're like, okay, I need to figure out what happened. And my biggest question was, well, what's really true? I spent 2 years in therapy asking that question, and ultimately wrote a book called Reinvented Life about that process and asking the question, what is true? It's really, really funny when you ask that question with somebody else staring back at you for almost 2 years, you really peel back a lot of onion, a lot of layers of your soul. And you get
Right.
to a point where you're like, oh, okay, this is what's true. It's really not, money is not this thing that's going to make me happy and going and getting more and chasing it. There's something different. When you, on the other side of that, what I learned was that if you can focus on a purpose, not just passion, but people get all wound up about, oh, I'm really excited about this thing. And then I see them a week later and they're excited about something else. And I'm like, okay, passion is going to keep you broke and chasing shiny objects. So
Mhm.
this deep purpose, like the stuff that I'm involved with now, is purposeful. There's a mission. And what I've found the last decade, when you're deeply focused, look at Elon Musk or anybody else that's doing something massive, there's a deep purpose and you're serving others. And what happens is the money becomes a side effect that you start to see. And it's usually there's a time delay. So a lot of people don't really even understand this because they're too quick to change directions, too
Mm.
quick to change purposes or passions or whatever. And when you give it time and you stay focused, all of a sudden, almost like magic, this one day happens where there's more money than you can spend or you're like, oh, and then you go, okay, well, cool. And then you go back to your passion and purpose and mission and like all this stuff. That's one of the mysteries for people. They're like, I don't understand. I'm really passionate about this thing and I don't see the money. And I'm like, you don't have a purpose built into this thing and you haven't been going long enough. And that's the missing element. People they quit too early and they don't really have a deep purpose that serves other people. They just have something that's really fun. And that's not how
Yeah.
it works.
Right. And it is fun to make money and it is fun to do deals. And it can feel, I think, sometimes in real estate, really fun and flashy and great. And it's all in the up and up. But what so many people learned, or what happened to so many people, I should say, in 2008 was, that everything stopped really suddenly, harshly, and created the next 15 years that we've been experiencing up to now is a market that was a result of what happened in 2008. And I'd love to hear more about, so you weren't alone when all that happened, right? But the whole world kind of ended for a lot of people and everyone's reality was blown up. So what did you find your purpose was? What was that purpose for you that brought you through that?
Well, one of the things that's really it was painful. I actually was fairly alone in my mind, even though a lot of people were going through a very similar thing, and the world blew up financially, and it was taking people down, and there were a lot of homeless people. It wasn't just Damien, And one of the things that I learned from that is it's incredibly important to build a deep connected community of people that you're like, I remember after this happened, I wrote this book and my mom read the book and she said, "How come you never told me about any of this stuff that you were going through?" And I thought, well, what would you have said? "Oh, it'll be fine, honey." There would have
Right.
been, lovingly, she would have been supportive, but had no idea how to support me because she hadn't been through anything like that. So it's really important to have people not only that are around you that you can lean on, but people that have been through things that are like 20, 30 years older, that have been through cycles and they can give you perspective. I cut those people out. And so when I was going through this thing, I didn't have anybody saying, "Okay, here's what's going to happen. It's going to take about 5 years. There's going to be opportunities." I just was freaked out. And that's where I see a lot of people in real estate now that have gone through some stuff that are ignoring reality and thinking that's going to work. I promise it doesn't. So on the other side of that thing, to your question about how did I figure out what that was, part of it was this work I did with this guy named Frank, and we studied together. And it was also the death of my dad when he got to the end of his life, and we were talking a lot, really our last conversation. He looked at me and he said, "There were so many things that I wanted to do." And he was out of time. He had cancer. He was about weeks away from dying. And it really hit me that we all have a purpose. We all have a reason, and it's not to consume. That is not, we're not hedonistic, trolls. We're
Right.
meant to serve other people. That's why we're here on this planet in some capacity. And I realized he had never really gone after that purpose. He had spent a lot of his life having fun and playing it safe and not going for it. And so there was a lot left undone. And I
Right.
started thinking about what's my purpose here? And it's really to free 1 million people from financial bondage. And it's me as a teacher and me as someone that can create vision, that can see into the future. That's my job. That's why I'm here. And so everything I do is based on that core premise. So it was really shifting into that. It wasn't going and flipping a house. It wasn't going and that wasn't the new purpose. That could have been a tool for the purpose. But
Mhm.
when people are like, "Oh, I'm going to go do houses," and I say, "Well, what do you do?" And they say, "I'm a real estate investor." I'm like, "Yeah, but what do you do?" And they're like, "What?" And what I'm asking is, what are you doing on earth? Not
Right.
what are you doing day to day? Like, I don't give a crap what you do. What I care about is what is the overriding core thing for your life. And nobody really says that. 99.9% of the people tell you what they're doing for money. And I'm like, not very interesting. What's really cool is when somebody is obsessed, like Grant Cardone's book, Be Obsessed or Be Average, Boba.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love that. And people are like, "Grant's crazy." I'm like, Grant actually is right. So when you get obsessed about something, anybody that's doing anything of meaningful substance on planet Earth is obsessed about their thing. Not like this influencer, "I'm obsessed about this door," or "I'm obsessed about this thing." Like deeply obsessed about something that matters to other people. And that's when the world changes for the better.
Yes. And it sounds like you were really inspired from that moment to write 12 books. And what was that process like for you to write your first, was your first book after that experience?
So writing a book is brain damage. And the books that you have behind you, one of them is called Seller Mistakes, that I haven't read. I've read the other ones, Gary Keller books. But what's interesting is my first book was published in 2000. It was 2004, 2005. So it's 20 years ago. It was called Maverick: Mistakes in Real Estate Investing. Let's see, the mistakes I made and the lessons I learned at the School of Hard Knocks and the University of Getting the Crap Kicked Out of Me. It's a huge title. And what it was this book of a compilation of lessons, things that I actually did that when you added it all up, it was about $1 million. This was very early. So I went through this process and I thought, I'm going to leverage what I've learned. I'm going to leverage these mistakes and I'm going to share those with people. And so that was the first book. That's what I ended up doing.
Wow. And because so many people I've talked to that have written books have said that it's a very cathartic experience and kind of getting out what's in your mind. And then also, of course, helping people go through reading and then having able to reach out to you. And tell me how you've gone from the being an author into your work today.
So one thing that is interesting is a lot of authors don't really do a lot. They just write about things. I mean, I prefer to read people telling me what they did and what the experience was, not just regurgitating theory or something.
Yes. Right.
So there was a shift into about 10 years ago. I started learning about the retirement space and I started learning that there's ways to use the tax code to build up wealth. And most people didn't have a clue about this. They said, "But I've got a 401k at work." And then that was it. That was their plan. It was a 401k and a social security and they think I have a house, but you're not going to eat your house. So their plan was hopefully their 401k ended up being big enough at some point. And what I learned back in 2000, or like just after this 2011, 2012, was that there's a lot of options that people have that they can control and drive their retirement stuff. And so I ended up writing a book called the QRP book and built a company around giving people control of their retirement money, because a lot of people are interested in real estate and then they go, well, I don't have any money. The reality is they had money in 401k that they didn't realize they could use. So
Right.
we've given people this education and created a community around this, and then created a product called the EQRP where people can take their retirement money and go buy real estate and gold and crypto and startups. And it's meant, so this goes back to that mission, that
Mhm.
freeing a million people from financial bondage, breaking those shackles. This is a tool to help support that. If you can give people not only the actual tool, the machine, the EQRP, but a community and this network, and you build that all together, it serves that purpose. And then people's financial shackles start being broken. So that's what the EQRP was built because of. It was because of that idea that this is how I need to serve other people and teach them. How do I do that? I do the brain damage, learn about the tax code, write a book about it, which is brutally hard to make it in
Yeah.
English where people are actually going to learn something and not just go to sleep. So
Right.
that was the process. That's how it started.
That's really cool. I think that's just a fascinating story. I love that you talk about purpose. And I kind of like to bring it now to FrameTek and your company that kind of has an innovative approach to construction. So I'd love to learn more. Tell us about FrameTek and how that helps people in the same way.
So FrameTech with this idea that came to us about 3 years ago, and it was such a cool idea that we ignored it for about 6 months, which is really kind of funny. We were so important and so busy that we said, "Oh, we don't have time to do this." And we eventually looked at this. It was a stack of papers from a close friend of mine. He said, "You got to look at this," and I said, "Great." And it was actually a funny story because he said, "I want to come and show you this deal." So he flew to Dallas and handed me a stack of paper. I said, "You really could just email this to me,"
Yeah.
but no, he had to fly. So we eventually look at this thing, and it's this idea that the construction industry is archaic and slow, and it hasn't really changed. The last innovation in construction was 1954 with the nail gun. Like, not much has changed in 70 years. So we were looking at this thing, and it was these guys in Arizona that had this idea that you could, if you used a different process, you could eliminate waste almost completely, like 99% of the waste being eliminated, and you could speed up the framing process by, say, 4 times faster than normal. And I thought, okay, that's really interesting, because if you speed things up by that much and you reduce waste, which saves a ton of money, there's probably a business model. So we got really excited about it and met with them, and over lunch said, yes, we're in. And so we told them we would write the $40 million check for them, and they said, that's amazing, and you're totally full of crap. There's no way that this is true. And then we started funding it a couple weeks later, and that was just over 2 years ago. And our first plant here in Arizona is coming online this summer. And basically what we're doing is we're building all the bones for houses and apartments. So when somebody comes to us and says, here's my plans for my house or 100 houses or an apartment complex, we take those, we convert them into our system, and then we build all the bones, the walls, the trusses, the floors, and then we go and assemble them on site. So we're vertically integrated. And basically what happens is we're disrupting the framing industry, which is a giant part of construction. It's 92% of houses and apartments in America are built with wood studs and wood. So we're innovating in a not a incremental way, but an exponential way. So it's literally 10 times better. The quality is 10 times better. Removing 99% of the waste. We have almost no energy that's consumed by the grid because the entire plant will be run off of solar almost completely. So it's reimagining the entire process. And what this does is it really disrupts an industry and forces it to step up. It's like when Elon said, I'm going to do this thing, and then other companies are like, crap. And it's not just the electric, it's the technology. He's saying, I'm going to do this so much better, not a little bit better, but I'm going to rewrite the rules, and everybody has to adjust and they have to do better. And that's what's happening here so that we can help solve this problem. We've got a massive housing crisis. It's 5 to 7 million units missing. We're going backwards about 600,000 every year. We
Yes.
build 1,000,002, and we need 1,000,008 in terms of units.
Yes.
And so
Yeah.
this helps us do that. We've got a couple of plants here in Arizona where these are going to be rolled across the country, in Texas, the Carolinas, Florida. And it's really meant to solve this problem. So when you think about what should I do, find a big problem and then just go bury yourself in that thing. And we were fortunate that we had some very cool people that were not only had massive amounts of integrity, but had incredible amounts of institutional knowledge that they'd been doing something for 50 years. Like our creator, Marvin, started in the early 70s. So this guy started doing this stuff. He's been bleeding sawdust since before I was born. And so having those type of people involved, most people that are out there doing something have been doing it for 5 minutes, and they go, this is great. And it's like, well, how long have you been doing it? No, it doesn't matter. It's a great idea. it actually really does matter because
It
you can
really
see
does.
into the future. And that's what we're doing now. We're building this and people are like, what else you doing? I'm like, that's it. My
Yeah.
head has been down. And there's a lesson there. Most people are trying to keep up with all the things and they're not really making any penetration into anything. They just kind of bounce off the surface around everything and they wonder why they're not making any headway. And the alternative of that is when you go deep into something, you almost lose track of everything else. And it's like Michael Phelps winning whatever, 1,000 gold medals. He did one thing for a decade. I mean, he swam, he swam. And did he have a life outside of that? Not really. His only other life was eating a lot. Like he
Yeah.
had, stacks of pancakes and everything. So there's the fuel and it kept him alive and on this thing. And that's one of the things that's missing for people that aren't really getting anywhere or they'll like I had a friend of mine that said, man, I got a case of the Mondays. And I was like, man, that's embarrassing. And she was insulted. She's like, well, that's not very nice. And I said, it's true. Like I look at Sunday night, I get excited because the team's coming back together on Monday. I'm fired up. And I said, the problem is you haven't tapped into your potential. And the thing that's frustrating you is you're going into Monday and deep down, you know that there's more that you could do, but instead you're only doing a certain amount. And she's incredibly talented, does great work in medicine, but she's limiting her potential. And I think that's where people, they miss the juice of life. And then they end up talking about how they got a case of the Mondays, which is like nauseating.
Yeah, it is. I know. And it was like a joke in Office Space too, you know. It's like, don't be her. Come on.
No, like stop it or stop telling me about it. You're
Yeah.
like, "Ugh," makes me want to vomit.
So I'm really interested in this framing company. I mean, when you're saying you're reducing waste and you're assembling on site, so you're deploying the labor, or are you training folks? Maybe you're not at this point yet, but I'm really curious to learn more.
Yeah, we're doing it. So it's entirely vertically integrated. So a builder, if let's say you have a house or you have 100 houses and you
Mhm.
bring us your designs, 2 weeks later, you're going to have a framed house on site that you gave us specs for. This is not prefab where you pick one of 5 manufactured houses.
Right.
We're literally going to build, and it's because we have this almost completely automated factory and a lot of robotics and just forward thinking using AI and using technology that exists. The way that we have really no waste is we're creating a system using finger joining. Basically, what happens is when boards are used for construction, you have a 9 foot wall and you're like, okay, well, I guess I have to use a 10 foot board because they come in 2 foot increments. And you end up on site, they cut a foot off and that goes in a dumpster. So the average house has 3 40-yard dumpsters full of wood that are thrown away. In our system, all of our boards are jointed together. So we cut these teeth at each end and we stick the boards together, glue them. What happens is we have one continuous board and then we cut each piece we need. So we need an 8 foot piece or 12 or 17 for whatever it is. And we cut those. We have sawdust and we have corner cuts. That's our waste. And so we take all that stuff, we build the trusses, the floors, the walls, and then we put them on our FrameTek trucks. And then our teams go out there and our FrameTek framers go and put these things together. So you don't have piles of wood that's stolen off of sites. You don't have
Right.
the elements destroying things. I mean, wood gets destroyed in wind and rain and the elements. And we have these things. Not only is it faster, but it's predictable. So we say we're going to be framing on June 30th and July 1st. And they're like, great. So they line up everybody, electricians, plumbers, the day after, and the framing is there. It's done.
Right.
So instead of wasting weeks and months with hoping your framing is going to be done, hope your framers are going to show up, everybody gets to have this predictability, which saves a ton of money, which makes housing more affordable and more abundant. So our system takes that entire process out of the equation for a builder, and that's the biggest bottleneck and headache in construction in America. It's the biggest problem that's out there, but like bar none. That is it, and we're solving it.
Yes. And, the housing crisis, it's really is a supply issue, right? And something that I've been thinking about since 2008, it was such a hard stop and people were building like crazy before then, right? Because money was, everywhere. And then that happened. So we saw this huge halt in construction. So we're like playing this really bad game of catch up, but we're really far behind the 8 ball. And I think it's something that's felt across the country in almost every single market. We don't have enough supply to meet the demand, or we are in an affordability crisis too, where you do have people that have jobs, have savings, or want to buy a house, are ready to deploy, but they don't qualify, or banks won't qualify them for the cost of the house that it's going to be on the market. So looking to the future, I mean, if you can solve this problem, How do you see that reflecting back to your own purpose, and how is it going to affect the real estate market?
So one of the things that happens when you do something, so these plants take about 60 plus million dollars to build, and that requires, so all that capital, where's it going to come from? That capital is coming from hundreds of investors. So we have hundreds of people that are investing in this, and they get to be part of the solution. So not only everybody's winning here, we're providing a solution for communities. They have more housing, creates more supply. When you have more supply, you can compress prices. Everybody has to do better. They have to become more efficient. And so ultimately that's better for communities. We have all these jobs that are great paying jobs because we're getting rid of the stuff. We're using robots instead of humans that get beat up. And so you're elevating what people get to do. So we're creating new, unique, more high level jobs. And so all that's great. And then you have the side effect is all this massive wealth is being created. So investors, part of our mission is to free people from financial bondage. We're creating an investment. It's not a black box. It's not a Ponzi scheme. Like a lot of stuff out there, people say, oh, I've got this great idea. It's like, yeah, that's a Ponzi. When you actually build something, it's very, very hard. Building manufacturing is really hard. Building a house is not very hard. It's actually, I've done that plenty of times. It's not hard. But
Right.
building a manufacturing house or facility that's 111,000 square feet with all these moving parts, the amount of, it's like hundreds or thousands of miles of wires. I mean, this is complicated. So when you have the technology and the people, the expertise to do that, what happens is you end up with something incredibly valuable. So in 2 years, we've gone from a napkin to a $463 million enterprise. And the investors are they're doing really well. And they're doing well because they are participating in building something that builds something. So it's like a second
Right.
order consequence. And so that's where this gets tied back in. When we said yes to this, we said this is a winner for everybody. There's only one loser, and we don't even count that one. And that's the old legacy thinking and the old way of doing it. So it's like, yeah, but that needs to be burned down because that process has not been serving people. It's stuck just harvesting the humans and instead of innovating. So we're knocking that out. And so that's how this serves the bigger purpose. And it's not just one. Our first one's coming online. We've got a second one that's going to be about 100 miles away. And then we've got a plan for about 50 of these that go across the country that completely changes the construction industry in America.
That's really, really exciting. Well, Damien, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing more about your journey. And I think it was really inspiring. Hopefully anyone listening to this is no longer afraid to lose $20 million because look where where it will take you, right? Take a chance, start going after your dreams, but have that purpose in mind. I think that's really the thread through all of this that's brought you where you are today, and creating these kind of world changing moves is really exciting.
Yeah, it's a fun ride to be on. And it's the fun part is when you really let go of being attached to something and you really become open to creation. And then all of a sudden, all that stress and pressure of trying to get the thing instead of creating and giving the thing. So it's a flip flop in how we're taught and trained. And when you let go of this issue around judgment of if I don't get 70% right, I'm a failure and all that nonsense, when you start realizing that's exactly how you learn and that's how you grow, that you have to go out there and make a mistake because you just don't learn anything unless you make mistakes. That's how it works. It's like people that want a black belt and they're like, okay, I'll just study the YouTube videos. And I was like, no, you need to go there and bleed. And after 20 plus years of studying martial arts, it's really clear to me that it's the same thing as business and investing. You have to go be in the middle of the thing. You have to go to the mat, the dojo. You have to be there. And if you're not willing to step on the mat, just don't even bother coming in the front door. And that's the same thing with investing. You got to go out there and do something and forget about the judgment. And one of my mentors years ago said something to me that stuck with me. He said, you have no idea how free you'll be until you stop caring what other people think about you.
Yeah,
And it's people
absolutely.
go, well, yeah, but I mean, so and so, people are so worried about the judgment and fitting in, and they destroy their own potential. So when you let go of that, and one of the easiest ways to do that is to have a mastermind, have a mentor that reinforces it, that you can borrow their confidence. And then you can go, oh, okay, I'm not a crazy person. Because if you just start telling everybody, F off, you don't know what you're talking about, you're going to think you're crazy. But if you have somebody that's reinforcing you going down your path, at least you'll probably not quit because you think you're crazy. You're like, okay, the rest of them are crazy. So I think that there's incredible value in making sure you have people around you that are supporting you that you can lean on.
Absolutely. And then when you do go through something, you won't feel that fear of talking to them because you're not going to get that judgment. You're not going to get the harsh, oh, I told you so, or you should have known better, because they're never going to say that to you because they wouldn't. they wouldn't have said that to themselves, and that's the type of people to surround yourself with. So that's great advice. So this will be in our show notes, but if anyone listening, if they want to get in touch with you or how to learn more about you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Best way to find me is the ventures that I'm working on. You check out eqrp.com or FrameTek, frametec.com. And I'm there. That's where I live. Like those worlds serving people, and you can find me there. And if you want to directly link to me, it's LinkedIn is a great place. So just
Like you
find me
said,
where,
your head
whatever.
down, right? Head
Yeah.
down, focused,
Yep.
going
Exactly.
for it. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Damien, and thank you to our listeners. This is the From Failures to Fortunes podcast. I'm your host, Kate Berry, and we'll see you next time. Thank you for joining us on another episode of Real Estate Investing Failures to Fortunes podcast. If you enjoyed today's stories and insights, don't forget to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Your feedback means the world to us. Remember, your journey in real estate is a marathon, not a sprint. Embrace the failures, learn from them, and turn them into your stepping stones to success. I'm Kate Berry, and until next time, keep hustling, stay inspired, and keep turning those failures into fortunes. Happy investing.